welcome to our workshop about generative AI and how you can use it for your business. If you want to, my name is Sandy DeWald. I'll be the instructor. Michelle is my assistant today. We're having a slight technical issue, so she's going to be advancing the slides for me. I couldn't, for some reason, seem to be able to share them. So you'll hear me say next a lot of times. That means to Michelle to click the button for me. So Michelle, you can go ahead and click the next one. There we go. Great. So first we're going to kind of couple some intro slides, and then we're going to kind of get into the heart of the presentation today. Will be about generative AI. It will be a full 2-hour workshop. Normally we go about 45 minutes to an hour, and then we take maybe a 5-minute break, and then we continue on for the next kind of 45 minutes to an hour. So I just want to give you a little bit overview about SCORE. So SCORE is an all-volunteer organization. I'm a volunteer, Michelle's a volunteer, all the mentors that are part of SCORE, anybody that you meet in SCORE is going to be a volunteer. It's a national organization, but then we have chapters. So we're part of the Nashville chapter. So there's chapters all across the country. And then kind of the main things that SCORE does is it's a nonprofit organization. We work alongside the Small Business Administration, but we're not part of the SBA, but we do work closely with them on helping to provide mentorship and workshops and training to small businesses, but then we don't do the finance or loans or any of that kind of stuff that the SBA then handles. Michelle, you want to connect next one? If you put in the, so I'll be, Michelle's going to be helping me monitor the chat, because when I'm presenting, it's really hard for me to kind of watch the chat window. So if you want to put in there, does anybody have a mentor today with SCORE? You just kind of put that in the chat window if you want to, or you can always come off mute. I'm totally fine with being interrupted and asking questions. So I just want to talk a little bit about, because the SCORE organization primarily is the mentoring is a big function of what we do. And the mentor is kind of like your business coach. Whether you have a mentor or you don't have one yet, it's a free resource for small businesses. And it's really that kind of business coach in your corner where they can you can bounce ideas off of them. You can ask them questions. They're a really good kind of broad range of knowledge across all different aspects of small business. And again, if you have one today, they can meet with you or as little or as much as you want, as often as you need, and they're there for the life of your business. So you might need them for a couple months during one part of your business, then you may not talk for a little while and you may need them again. So they're kind of always there as a resource for you, because sometimes it can be, not say lonely, but kind of you can feel kind of isolated as a small business owner. Other people in your family or your group may not, be in small businesses, and you're kind of there's no one really to talk to. So that mentor can kind of be that business coach and provide that, kind of a resource to connect you to other resources in the area. Next. The other part of what SCORE does is education. So we do workshops like this one, and we have all different workshops throughout the month. If you go to our Nashville SCORE website, you can see the ones that the Nashville chapter offers, but other chapters offer SCORE workshops, and then the national organization will offer different workshops as well. So we offer different ones every month. Some are every month, some are every quarter like this one. Some are just a couple times a year. Some are like one-off kind of like we have a pitch competition for women in small business. That's kind of once a year. So there's different, I guess, workshops and activities and lunch and learns and special events that you can get connected to other small businesses and again, learn other skills that you need to have to support your small business. Next. So who am I? I am I'm part of SCORE volunteer, but I'm not a mentor. I would not be your regular business coach. What I am is a subject matter expert. So what that means is I come in and I have specific areas of expertise, and your mentor would bring me in for deep dives on specific questions. So some of my areas of expertise is product development, product marketing. I've done over 20 years in the manufacturing and developing and launching new products to market. I also teach a pricing workshop for whether it's a physical product or a service. because pricing is something that a lot of people are, there's a lot of art and science in the way you price your goods and services. And then I also do new product development workshop, the pricing workshop, and then this Gen AI workshop. Again, all things that can help you in your business and just different aspects. You're still in charge of your business. You still are making the decisions. We're just providing you, here's some resources, here's some options, here's some things to think about, and kind of be that, here's some additional information and help. But then you ultimately still are in control and make the decisions for your business. Next. All right, so today we're going to talk about Gen AI. There are two types. When people talk about this, is kind of getting to the meat of the workshop. So there are two different types of, I guess, AI. So AI used to be called machine learning. It's been around for decades. I mean, 20 plus years. So AI is not new. What is new is how we're using it today and some of the technology that's advanced to make it easier for the average person to use and not have to be a data scientist or computer scientist to be able to access the power of AI. So there's two different types of AI. One is generative AI, and that's what we're going to focus on today. So it's actually generative AI is more text-based, is what I say. Traditionally, it's when people say Gen AI, they mean text, they mean content. It is going to be a model that generates content. You put input into it and you get an output, but it's in a text form. Examples of that is when you hear about Chat GPT, which is run by OpenAI. Google has Gemini, used to be called Bard. Microsoft Copilot used to be called Bing Chat, and then Anthropic Claude are the kind of main text ones that you hear when you say Gen AI. Those are kind of the big models that people talk about. We're not going to talk about image AI as much today, or AI generated images. So again, those are different models that generate an image. You can either upload an image and have it modify one, or you can generate kind of one from scratch. You still put in a prompt or you still put in text, and then it generates an image for you. Examples of that are DALL-E, Midjourney, and Stable Diffusion are kind of the big ones. But again, more models are coming out all the time in both of these areas. So these are the kind of the what early adopt or early kind of players in the field, but there's all different ones that keep coming out, and more of the models are coming out are tailored to specific uses. So people will use Jasper a lot if they're primarily focused on marketing, because it has some tools and things that really kind of shortcut it for marketers. Perplexity is another one that people will use, and it's a kind of good if you're really looking for more research-based AI, because we'll talk about what AI is good for and what it's not good for in your business. And these other models are kind of filling in these other gaps. Why we're focusing on Gen AI, the text base, because I think it's going to be the biggest bang for your buck. If you're going to learn a process or learn these models, it's a great one to start because there's a lot of free tools out there that are really quite good and can get you really far in your business. Yes, there are paid versions that add more functionality, but the free version of some of those models are really actually very, very good. And they can get you started into this AI process without starting to pay a lot of money to see if you even like it, how do you use it, and then kind of get comfortable with it before, and kind of integrating into your business before you start paying for it. The AI image AI, we're not going to focus on as much because one, it's the steeper learning curve because you have to be very specific on the prompt you put in. You have to be very descriptive, and to be able to get an image out on the backside. It's also, I always think when we always talk about when marketing for your business is that you need to show who you are to your customers. And I feel of AI generated images is kind of like using stock photography. It's not you, it's not your actual business, it's not your actual customers, but it's like if I were to grab a stock image and use it in my business. And we always say we'd rather have you use real images, real photography, real pictures of you, how you make your product, how you go to business, who your customers are. That's going to be more authentic to your business and get people to know you, as opposed to kind of using stock images, because we can all recognize a stock image, right? When you go to a website, and yes, there's sometimes when you need to use that, especially if you don't have anything yet, you're just getting started. But again, we kind of can always say, oh, that's a stock image. So the AI generated images still feel a little more like stock images because they're not specific to your business. They won't show your specific product. They won't show your specific customers or you. You can't put yourself in that AI image. So we're not going to focus on those. Oh, also on the image AI, there are tools. Image AI is being built into other tools. So instead of and they're pretty expensive, like the Dolly, Midjourney, Stable Diffusion. I think they're running around $50, $60 a month. So you really need to be like a graphic designer or a web developer, somebody that's going to be using a lot of needing to generate a lot of images to kind of offset that cost. And some of the tools that you might be using today are kind of including image AI already. So if you use Canva Pro, it has an image AI in there, so you can kind of start playing with that as part of your Canva of subscription. Again, you're paying for the Canva Pro, not the free version, but that's a way you can kind of start playing with these tools without going out and buying, subscribing to the AI image AI models only. If you have the Adobe Suite, they have Firefly. Again, it's a similar concept. It's already built into the paid suite version of the tools. So with both of these, though, it is rapidly evolving. I think it's amazing how many more models keep coming out every month. Now we're going to talk about the big models. Now they're building small models that are designed for specific instances. So it's going to, and there's going to be ones that come to the forefront, ones that are good for specific case uses or case uses, but then others are going to be kind of more general ones. So we'll keep every time I teach this workshop, I think something else has changed. So we're going to keep evolving this landscape. What we're going to talk about today in the workshop, though, is specifically a foundation of AI. So what I want to talk about today can be applied to any AI model that you use, whether it's ChatGPT or Gemini or Copilot or Claude. You're going to learn kind of the fundamentals of how these models work, and then how you input the information into the model to get the best out of the model. And it's going to be applied, it can be applicable to any model that you use. I don't care which one you use or start with or like eventually, but we're going to learn how to work kind of the foundation of all these models and how they work. Because although they have different features built on top of the models, structurally how the models work and how you interface with the models is the same across all the platforms. All right, next, Michelle. So what is generative AI? We hear that and I'll use the term Gen AI or generative AI, it's the same thing. They're all based on what's called a large language model. That's why they're good about text and content, because they're a large language model, or you hear the term LLM. So, and I kind of I'd rather them have used the term augmented intelligence instead of artificial intelligence. These are not thinking models. They don't reason and they don't have thinking skills, but they can do, and they're never going to fully replace people. You're always going to need a human in the loop is what they call it. There's always going to need to be a person involved in what these models generate. What I feel like is their augmented intelligence. So they come alongside you as the human, as the person that has the expertise in this area, and it's going to be like another tool in your toolbox that can come alongside and help you in multiple ways, but it's not going to replace you or the human. So it's going to be more effective when it's combining the human and the AI model together to create the content. And what that means is that it's going to be something that you think of it like an assistant. So if you had an assistant in your business and you ask them, hey, write this report or do this thing, you need to give them certain instructions, because that assistant it doesn't know what you want without you telling it. So you're going to be able to think of an AI model as an assistant to your business. And you're going to refine it. It's not going to be perfect the first time. It won't exactly do the same thing every single time. If I put a prompt in and somebody else puts a prompt in, we'll get two different results from the model, because it is natural. There's some natural variation and variability in the model. And we'll talk about how that works, how the models work, to know why there's some randomness built into the model. It's never going to be perfect on the first time. So if I told an assistant to do something, odds are that person's not going to come back and have exactly what I wanted the first time. It's going to be iterations like, oh, well, that's not quite right. Go back and do this. Oh, okay. Now maybe tweak this part a little bit and this, or expand on this part a little bit. So think about it like you would an assistant, that you need to kind of go back and forth with that model to kind of refine the output. Um, it also is backwards looking training data. So a model it trains on a huge volume of content, and but it stops at a certain point because the model has to be released for people to use. So, you know, it might be September 21, 2021 was like the original date for the models to end. Then it was kind of April 22. And then, so it's kind of with each release, the model gets trained on newer information. But in reality, models are going to kind of stop training at a certain point because more updated information isn't going to help the model as much. So they're always going to have a stopped point in time. So, and it depends on which model you're using when that cutoff date is. So just know that if you need it to integrate any current information, so say the model stopped in September of last year, if I wanted to have it know content that happened a month ago, I would need to make sure I tell the model that information, because it's not going to know that training data is not in its memory to say. So I'm going to have to tell it dates or things that happened since the model cutoff date. So just kind of know that if you need current information as part of the output, you need to actually tell the model that information so it knows to incorporate that when it gives you its results. Next, Michelle. Again, at any time, put a question in the chat. Michelle will get those. She'll interrupt me. She has no problem interrupting me. Or you can always come off mute and interrupt me as well. I don't mind that. And then again, at the break time, I'll stop and have time for questions too. So what are some of how the benefits of generative AI? It's amazing how powerful these tools are. All the Gen AI models are. They can really be beneficial for your business. And I think they may seem kind of strange or a little scary to start, or you don't know what you're doing. That's fine. You can't break the models. So everything is just keep trying different things. But there's a lot of benefits to these models and how it can help, especially small businesses. We hear about big companies doing it, but it really can be impactful for small businesses as well, because you never have enough time in the day, anyone, but when you're trying to run a small business on by yourself or with a small group team, you really need to have time. So I think increased productivity is one of the biggest benefits, because when you're writing content, you're not starting from that blank page. It can create that first draft for you. It can summarize, it can create an outline, build a checklist. Like it can do these kind of get you started. So you're not looking at like, well, I have to start this from scratch. You don't have to. You give the model a prompt, and they can at least kind of generate that initial output for you, that initial kind of first draft of whatever you're looking for. So, and it can also create steps for you. It can do a checklist. It can make sure that you're not missing points in your content. Again, it can also reduce tedious tasks. So there's things that you do over and over and over, and you're like, why am I writing this thing over and over and over? Then let the model do it. Like you can create surveys, you can do quizzes, you can, there's templates you can have the model say, instead of I do this output all the time, I put new information in, but it needs to be the same format. Well, model can put all the information in that format for you without you having to do it. So it can also find key points in an article, or you can say, look, what are the three main things to talk about here? Or what are the three main things here? So it can kind of give you those you don't have to go through and find those points yourself. You can say, hey, read this article for me. Give me the three highlights from this article. It will also can be an independent check. So it's, whether it's spell checking, I know we have like Word that can spell check, but it can actually check like grammar and content, like structure and flow. And you can have, does it make sense? It can take out technical jargon, because sometimes in some industries we tend to use acronyms and things that maybe the person or our audience that we're talking to doesn't understand those yet, but we use them so every day. The models will catch kind of those things. If you ask it to say, hey, read this, what I just wrote, and with this perspective, and tell me if it's too technical, if I'm missing key points in an article. If I said, hey, I wrote this thing, what am I missing anything? It can evaluate your content and go, oh, well, you might want to talk about this point, or you need to add this in as a suggestion. It can also help you with problem solving and creativity. So I call it kind of an ideation tool that, it's helping you target to make sure that we'll talk about this later about targeting the right audience. Because when you're writing content, you want to make sure that you're targeting a specific, we always talk about that in marketing, that who is your target audience? Who are you talking to? Who's your target customer? And you want to make sure that you're writing to that target customer. So if I'm writing to somebody that's a beginner in a field, and I've been doing this for 20 plus years, I may not understand, I may have forgotten what it's like to be a beginner, but I can have the model help me, analyze this from a beginner standpoint. Am I being too, do I need to adjust what I'm writing to make it easier to understand for somebody just starting out? Like I'm talking about step 10 and they really need steps 1, 2, and 3. So again, it can also provide alternatives. So you can say, hey, here's write it one way, generate and write it a different way, write it a different way. You can get different, it'll kind of keep, again, that's that iterative process with the model, but you can kind of keep writing, like different versions of something. If you're not quite right, it's like, hey, rewrite this again to see if you like it in a different way, or rewrite it with this audience in mind and rewrite it with this. Because sometimes we have two different target customers. So you may want it written one way for selling to a wholesaler, and you may want it written differently when you're selling to a consumer. So you can have the same content, but you have to target it a little differently based on who the audience is. And then I touched on this already, like generate ideas faster. So you can iterate, try different ways, test multiple ideas. What if it's this way or that way or this way? You can do different versions. You can modify for different platforms, which is great. So if you write one blog post, then you can say, write me, or if it's a LinkedIn post, you can say, then write me a Facebook post from this article, write me to Instagram post. Like you can have a kind of repurpose that content into different platforms, and it'll reconfigure and know, oh, well, in this platform, it can be longer form content. Here I need 3 little short posts, for Facebook or Instagram or whatever the latest social media platform is that you use. It can kind of rewrite, instead of you doing it, let the model do those things. Go ahead, Michelle. So how does Gen AI work? So I'm not a data scientist, and that's what these people get paid a lot of money to do. So essentially, and that's why when we say chat GPT, this is why engineers shouldn't name things. So GPT just stands for generative pre-trained transformers. So models have always been around, which so data scientists, computer scientists have written code to create these models, and they've been used. AI has been used. Every algorithm that you've ever used, Amazon, when they recommend, hey, you might also like this, that's all AI in the background based on a model that a computer scientist has written, or a data scientist. And there'll be all different models running on the backside. And it's the big technology is this transformer piece that sits in the middle. And again, I'm not a data scientist to understand, and even they don't know, that's when they talk about the black box, it's this transformer that sits on top. So it takes the model, it runs it through this transformer, and then that gives you, the transformer allows this kind of interface on the front end that the average person is, that's the prompt that goes in, and when you get input in and out, it's done with natural language. I don't have to know code anymore. Before, I'd have to know code in the model, that the code that the model is developed in. I'd have to know that code to be able to give instructions to the model for it to run what I needed to do. Now I don't have to do that. Because of this transformer sitting in the middle, I can now type in natural language. I can type in the text, language that you and I use every day into the model. It can then run in the background and then come back to me in natural language. So that's that transformer piece that is really, and that transformer part is the relationship. It understands the relationship between words. So it's training these models on language and on words and on structure and on syntax and order. And, it's building these training models on content, but it's on text. It's how people write every single day. And that's what that transformer piece has made it so we can input natural language into the model. The model can still run its algorithms, all the stuff on the back end, but then come back to us in natural language that we can understand. So we don't need a programmer anymore to interface between us as the average person in the model. And that's really what's taken off in the last couple of years, why average people can use these models, because we don't need to know code. I don't care what code or what the model is running on or how it's developed. Because of that transformer and the input in and out of the model is a natural language that I can understand. So these models, again, they're called large language models. So they're built on billion, billions of pages of text. They're not thinking. So this is the hard part. The models are predictive models. So they're creating when the model and the AI is running, it's saying, I've trained on all this data. I know these are the sentences, these are structures, this is how language works. It's like if I read 100,000 books. I mean, it's reading a lot more than 100,000 books, but it's taking a huge corpus of data, of content and text and how language works. And it's putting that into a probability matrix. It's saying it's a predictive, these are predictive models. It's predicting the most likely thing that you want. When you put in a prompt into the model, it's saying the most likely thing based on all the things that I've trained on, all the hundreds of thousands of billions of pages of text. It's saying the most likely thing that you want is X based on what you told me coming in to the input into the model. It's predicting and giving you back what it thinks. We still use those terms, but it's giving you back what it's saying, well, probability wise, this is what you want. So these models learn language patterns and what should come next, just like we do when we're learning a new language. We're learning patterns and structure and the most likely thing. So if the model says, if you typed in the prompt, I pledge allegiance to, the model knows, well, the most likely thing that you want based on that sentence is I pledge allegiance to the flag. It's not going to come back with carrot. Carrot would be very unlikely. You could force it to, you could say, I want you to come back with I pledge allegiance to a vegetable, and then it would give you a carrot maybe, or potato or something else. So you can force it that way. But if you're just saying, hey, the most likely set answer to this, the next word in the sentence is flag. Or if I said Mary had a little, the model knows, because based on all its training, that the most likely word that you want next is lamb, not sports car. So again, it's going to give you, it's kind of predicting the most likely thing in response to the input you give it. Go ahead, Michelle.
Well, Sandy, before
Oh,
we move
yeah.
forward, Harry has a question. What
Mhm.
kind of technology created on? Is it Python?
And I don't know the exact coding. Again, no, they're all proprietary, so no one will tell you what their model is based on. You can't, it's even OpenAI or any open source model, they'll give you access to certain layers of the model, but you can't access the actual underlying code. So I don't know if it's Python or what it's on. And they won't tell you what they base the model on. And even I've had talked to data scientists, and that's their concern with some of these models. When they want to modify the model, they can't. It's locked into certain layers where they can't get into to say, oh, I want to change this part of the code. Well, they can't even get in to change the code. So that's where people are developing their own models, or they're creating more because they need to modify the original models to do their application. But I don't know the actual underlying code, if it's Python or something. My guess that it's going to be a very common programming language. It won't be back in the day when it was C++ and all those other ones that no one uses anymore. So my guess it would be something like a Python, but I don't know for sure. Um, so, and the good things that we don't need to know as the average user using the model. It's all in natural language. So now you can use models. Claude is really good at coding. So Claude, which is by Anthropic, people will use that a lot for coding. So if you know a specific language and you need a piece of code that for a certain script, Claude is actually a really good one where you can tell it, I need it written in in a Python language, blah, blah, blah. And it'll give you actual code that you can then put into a website or whatever you're needing that coding for. So it's actually a good one if you are a coder and have that skill set. All right. So, okay. So Gen AI. So for your small business, there's some things that it's good for and some things that people are using it for, but it's not the best use. Again, it's a tool like anything else. It's not a tool for everything. And so there's some really good applications for it and some one that I would just say, hey, it's not ideal. People are using it for those things, but then they kind of complain when they get results back that aren't exactly what they wanted. So, well, yeah, it's not really designed to do that. There are other tools that are better for some applications. So it's great for ideation, brainstorming. So it's good for generate 10 ideas for this, give me 10 headlines. I need, what are some of the key things if I was starting, in this field, what do I need to know? Like, so it's really good for kind of generating ideas and brainstorming. I'll use it all the time for like, give me, what are the 5 things I should know if I'm starting this? Or what are give me 10 different headlines for this, or I need 5 blog post ideas about this topic or something like that. So it can give you some really good kind of brainstorming ideation. Like if you were sitting around a table talking to other people, kind of coming up with ideas, it's great for that. It's really good at that generating that first draft. So I kind of say that depending on as long as you have a good input into the model, a good prompt, it's that first draft can get you like 80% there. I mean, it'll give you a really good structure. We'll talk about how you put the information in, but it can generate a really good first draft. Again, it should never be your final draft. And I'll say that over and over, and we'll talk about that a little later, but it's that really good kind of starting point if you're not starting from scratch. It's great for that. In all different kinds of content. It's great for outlining things or making a list or summarizing. If you had kind of a longer article and you want to say, well, I want to write like what's the summary of this? I'll get paper sometimes and you're like, I'm not reading these 15 pages of paper, whatever. I can put that in the model and say, summarize this for me. Or what are the three key points in this article or something like that. So it can do that kind of for me. Then I can write if I'm going to write a critique of some article or a commentary to something, then it can kind of summarize that for me, give me the 3 points, and I can evaluate that and kind of go from there. It can, if you've written something, it can help you rewriting things. It can help you kind of editing content. So sometimes you've written it yourself, and then it can kind of be that editor, proofreader, spell checker, all that kind of, and it can also look at like structure, like, does it make sense? Does this flow correctly? So you can ask it as an editor to kind of look through and say, and it'll give you suggestions, and you can ask it about formatting and, bullets and headers and subheaders and that kind of stuff. So it can make your content look more easy to read as well. So it can kind of give you that editing, kind of that editor in your back pocket. And then it can give you feedback and critique. So you can say, hey, I've written this article. What are the key things I'm missing? Is there something that's unclear? You can ask it to critique as well. So an editor can look like content, grammar, syntax, structure, but you can ask it for different kind of feedback on critiquing the quality of your writing or are you missing key parts of something that you're writing? What I would say is like, don't use a Gen A model, and this is what people probably use it the most for, sometimes incorrectly, as a search engine. Go to your Googles or your Bings or your whatever. I can't, the other one, any search engines. It's not a search engine. So it's going to, because what's the problem with a search engine is you usually are asking a question and maybe you need 3 or 4 references, or maybe you need it to say, well, I'm looking for different perspectives on something. Well, the model is going to give you one perspective. It's going to give you one output, but it may not be, it's like, and you don't know, the models won't give you where the source code came or the source attribution. Again, Perplexity is the only one that's come out that I would probably say you could use as a search engine, because what Perplexity does is when it gives you its output, it actually gives you the link back to the original source where it found it. So you can go check to make sure that information is correct and accurate and from a reliable source. So if I need a search engine, I need to know a stat for something. Well, I want to make sure it came from like a medical stat. I want to make sure it came from something like, the Mayo Clinic and not from some random weird site that I've never heard of, that has no, or it came from a trusted, reliable government stat as opposed to somebody that just wrote something on an internet page. So that's why I say use the regular search engines as search engines. I wouldn't use your Gen AI tool as your search engine unless Perplexity is the only one that I might do that, because it does give you the source where it pulled it from. The other thing I wouldn't do is that Generative AI, always need to research an attribute. If you did use Gen AI and it pulled in a stat or pulled in some specific fact, then you need to go and make sure that that fact is accurate. We'll talk about hallucinations in the model, but you are still responsible for the content. You can't just say, well, Gen AI told me it was fine. No, if you're going to put it out there, it's still going to be your name on it, and you're still going to be associated with that content. So you need to make sure that if you need to check any stat or fact that the model says. So you can't just rely that the model is going to get it right. You have to go and, because there's a lot of information it's trained on. There's a lot of stuff that's not accurate out there in the web. So if it's pulling a stat, you want to make sure, oh, let me go check, where did that come from? And again, when you're posting, you always want to attribute back to the original source of any kind of material, like a stat or a fact or something that you're saying, well, so and so said. Well, you need to go find the original thing and link to it anyway, so you know that this is where people know where you're pulling that information from. It's also not the final output. So the model's going to give you the predictive or most likely, response back or output back to you on an input. But again, you still need to make it your own. You need to still make it in your voice. The model's not going to, it'll get close, but it's not, you need to put in your specifics to your business, or put in a customer story that the model won't know because it doesn't know your customers, you do. So you need to add in additional things to make that content unique to you and your business, and not just take the model, what output it gives you as, oh, well, this is good enough, I'll just go post this, as opposed to making it really tailored to your business and your customers and your industry. It's not quite good for long form, and I mean long form like we'll talk about context length, and all the models have some kind of max length in content or context. So some long form, like people will say, oh, you can write a book with Gen AI. Well, you maybe write a super short book, but you're really not going to write a huge book with Gen AI, because it's the context length, or you have to break it up into sub sections, because the models just have a max. And I'm using terms that aren't, any data scientists would hate me, but it has a max kind of memory of a chat or a thread, and then it kind of loses it after a while. So we'll talk about that a little later. So I wouldn't be looking right now to say, oh, hey, model, write me a I don't know, a book, or 5 chapters on blah blah blah. You may have to write each chapter individually of something, or break into sections and then put it all together. But super long form content is just not going to quite get there. Next slide, Michelle. So this is just, I just kind of brainstorm some things that you could use. This is just for you. I think you'll get these slides later. Michelle usually sends them out. But again, when I talk about brainstorming and ideation and first drafts and lists and all the kind of things that it can do, these are some ideas. Like you can evaluate, alternative approaches. You can do a checklist. You can create a content calendar. You can ask it to write 10 ideas for this, or 3 headlines for this, or summarize these notes, especially like for meetings. You'll see summarize these meeting notes into, because I write notes and they're like all over the board. So it's like, hey, summarize and organize these meeting notes for me. Or a lot of times you'll see things that will do transcripts from like a meeting. You can set the transcript on. Well, it's the way we talk is not always that easy to read and understand what's written down. So you can take that transcript into AI and say, hey, summarize these or rewrite this transcript, in a way that makes more sense, or give me the key points out of this transcript from this meeting that I had. That kind of stuff it's great at doing. You don't need to sit there and do it. Let the model do it. It can write descriptions for your product or services. If you're launching a new online course, it can help you write that description. It can help you write sales copy or a marketing copy or a website copy. So there's a lot of things that it can do. Think about anything that you would ask an assistant to do, and anything that you write today, the model can probably help you with it. So think about terms of like next time you start to write something like, well, what if I had the model help me with this? Or if I'm going to give it to an assistant, say, if I had an assistant, which sometimes we don't always have somebody there, but you can say, hey, the model can be your assistant, and say, well, okay, what would you do? What's a 12-month content calendar based on blah, 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 so you can can lay things out for you as an assistant would. Next, Michelle. Oh, and we're at a question and break. Oh, we're right at 40 minutes. So right on time. So we can take 5 minutes, come back at 10:45. Or I'll stay on for questions if Michelle, if there's any in the chat, or if you want to come off mute and ask questions too. But we can take 5 minute break for people that need it. I'm just going to sit here, even if you don't want to ask any questions.
Sandy, Gary is asking, whoops, just like, can you force the AI to limit its results to only more credible sources, e.g. education, government sites, etc.? Similarly, can these AI tools distinguish between misinformation, disinformation, propaganda found on the internet and critical sources?
No to the last question. So when it's training on data, it's training on it. There's no evaluation by the model to say this is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong. And when they do this, it's training on billions of pages and text and content. It's just looking at relationships between the language. It's not thinking, it's not evaluating, it's not saying, well, these are sites look like crap or these sites are more credible. It's just training on the whole bucket of data. That's why we're going to talk a little later about biases built into the models. And that's why, because human beings have biases built into our content, conscious or unconscious, there are biases in that content. So the models are going to have, it's training on all that data. So there are sometimes biases hidden in the models. So it's not going to, there's no evaluation by the model if it's good, bad, or otherwise. That's why it's a starting point. Now it's going to say the most likely. So if there's one random weird outlier that somebody said the earth is flat, it's going to know like, well, one weird thing I hear says that, but the 10,000 other websites that say the earth is round, it's going to say the most likely thing is the earth is round, not that it's flat, based on that one data point. So it is looking at the bulk of the data, but there are a lot of misinformation that's repeated and repeated and repeated and repeated out there. So that's why whenever the model gives you back content, you as the expert in that field, that's why it's never the final output. You have to go in and say, hey, I know this is wrong, or this is not my, and even if it's a different perspective that you may not agree with, you'll have to say, okay, well, the model came back most likely people, because a lot of times we'll say most people think this way, but you may have a different viewpoint. So then you have to go in and then adjust that content and rewrite it based on what your philosophy is, or how, if it's different than maybe what most everybody thinks, you might have a contrary or a different viewpoint. So that's why it's never the final output. And then Michelle, I forgot the first part of your question. Oh, sources, something. Sorry.
It's okay. Madi says, I'm a participant working in IT. You can limit the result to be based on any specific reputable sources by specifying them in the prompt. The model itself does not know if a piece of
Yeah.
information is true or not.
Yeah. And I would still go check it. So if I say only use stats from the US Census Bureau or something like that, like whatever you need, I would still go check that stat to make sure it pulled, because you can pull a fact, but maybe the context around that fact isn't correct. Like, we always can take stats and interpret them different ways. It can be the same stat, but I can say it's glass half full and you can say glass half empty. It's the same stat that the glass is at the halfway point, but we can look at it different ways. So I would still go back and check it, but you can say, yeah, pull, information only from these sources. The key thing at the models too. So a lot of the free models So it depends on when the stat, if you want the most current one, again, we talked about the cutoff date. So if it's a stat from 2025 and the model cut off at 2024, the most current stat wouldn't be in the model. Second is that the models, I'd still go back and check the stat, or I would go find the stat and say, hey, incorporate this stat into the output that you give me. I'd go ahead and give it to them if something that you really want to make sure that has already checked, that it's in there. And then I would say too that the models don't, so the paid versions of models, usually the free version, but the paid versions, you can actually add a plugin that lets it go out and check the internet for things. But the models, a lot of times the free versions won't have that internet connection to go live check, live go back and reference and pull something. But there are paid versions that a, have like a functionality where you can add in, I'm drawing a blank on, not an API, but it's like where you can actually have the model go call a specific, it can go out to the internet and do it. Otherwise, the models are standalone for the most part, especially the free, unless you add these additional tools on top in the paid versions to go out and like actually have it go out and connect to the internet and check something.
Gary asks, can you comment on Google's Notebook LM where you supply the data set it will answer from?
So the models too, I say content, but you can upload spreadsheets and charts. It used to be in the beginning where you couldn't upload that information. So, and the model and the context length has gotten longer for models. So it used to be in the past where you could only upload a small amount of content. And the free versions are more limited. The paid versions usually have longer context windows. Um, so yeah, the models actually are really good if you're doing like spreadsheets and you need to do an analysis of a spreadsheet. You can upload the spreadsheet in the model, and then say run analysis on this spreadsheet and do that for me. Where there's Notebook LLM, Notebook, I think it does more, right? All models will let you do that now. I'm not sure on the free, even on the free version, I think of Chat GPT, you can upload like charts and graphs and or spreadsheets and say, hey, use this in your data or analyze this for me or include this information in the output you give me. Notebook LLM, I hear people using that a lot for audio content. So people will upload like a transcript, or they'll upload an article or a transcript for something and kind of content and then say create. People are using it for podcasting, is what the most often I hear for notebook is that, and then it'll generate an audio converse, kind of spooky and fascinating at the same time, where it'll take that text that you give it, the article that you've written or the transcript or whatever it is, and it'll create two personas and it'll create a conversation between these two like avatars or personas based on this text you give it. Um, and it sounds, it's pretty believable like that, and it'll make it very conversational. So I hear people using Notebook for that a lot, which is really interesting, really interesting. Again, as a small business, I would just caution using avatars or like the image AI or these kind of audio avatars. It's not you. So for if you want to connect to your customers and they hear these avatars, that's great. But how do they connect with you as the business owner? If you're a small business, you're not a big company that has thousands of employees and no one really care, no one's like connecting into the specific person of the company. You're just connected to the brand. But if you as a small business, you want your customers to know you. So these are great tools that you can use, but just be cognizant of you how the customer know that how do they trust you if they just see these kind of avatars or talking heads, versus knowing you and you're giving that message to your target customers. That's the only thing I would kind of caution. But hey, they're interesting and they're getting better and better all the time. They used to be kind of crappy in the beginning. I shouldn't say that, but they were pretty, you know anyone remembers back in the 80s, and was it Max Headroom? That was kind of that, it's more jerky, just wasn't smooth and wasn't conversational. But now, they're 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 going to be just more and more powerful. But that's also going to be the problem of like, then you have the issues of people um, doing things with them that aren't correct too. So I always want to make sure that authenticity and who you are as a business owner comes across to your customers as the primary for anything that any content you put out in any form.
Harry would like to know, what does training the model mean? Does it,
Oh,
how does it happen? Do they
it's
just copy and
magic.
paste text into a programming tool and then
No,
somehow it works based on number of instances?
it is called the block box for a reason. So there is the coding out there. So it's kind of um let's just say, so there's coding that starts the model, and it starts, but then the model starts, the coding is written where the model can, I hate using the terms kind of self-learning, but then the model itself will continue to it's been instructed, and this is not, but it's been instructed to go learn. Okay, well, this is going to go and just pull and learn and gather from whatever data bases it says it can use, like what's ever been told. You can use the entire internet. Okay, it's just going to go out on its own, and that's the artificial intelligence part. There's no one specifically telling it, okay, in this database you go pull this stuff here, and in this database you pull this stuff here. None of the model is deciding, like it's saying, I got this big giant data, this big internet, or whatever it's been told. And there's a lot of copyright issues happening on the backside. And that's again not something as a user you need to worry about. That's again between the model and what data it was told it can use. And people are saying, well, you used my book and it's copyright protected and the model trained on it. The problem is that no one can tell exactly what the model trained on. It's just saying, go to the internet. And people are like, well, that my content on the internet is copyright. Well, it's on the internet, so it's public too. So there's a lot of copyright issues happening on the backside, but the model is then let loose in the sense it has parameters around it, but it decides and it trains and it does it, it's self-learning, and it actually starts learn it. There's no one telling it specifically where to go find this piece of information, or this, or only pick from the Mayo Clinic on medical data, and only pick from the US Census on this data. Like, no, it's learning, and it's going out there and just training on all, and it's self-learning. So that's the artificial intelligence part. And that's why when people ask data scientists, the model, they can say, well, they never say because it's all proprietary on how they train the model, but even that they can't say, well, this specific book was trained in this model, because the model is just going out and finding stuff and learning on its, I don't say learning on its own. It's a very odd, um, no one exactly knows. And you'll even hear data scientists and computer scientists will say, well, we gave it the parameters, but the model, as the artificial intelligence part, it then starts learning on its own. Like, we give it the structure, the guardrails, but then it goes and just and does its own thing. And that's why it takes a lot of money and a lot of data to train these models. But yeah, they can't pinpoint to a specific thing. And
Okay,
you want to get started again, or do you have more? I just saw another question pop up, but
let's see.
it went away.
Gary asks, not sure if you plan to address this in a later slide, but can you comment on the data security of
Mm,
information which we might feed into an AI tool?
yeah.
Example, medical professionals are obligated to protect patient data under HIPAA.
Yeah.
Is there any way to protect, e.g., a spreadsheet of patient illness? Similar situations exist in education
Mhm.
field, FERPA,
Yeah.
law, attorney-client privilege info. Is there any preferred
Oh,
AI for these situations where data secrecy is critical?
yeah. I will cover that a little bit later about some of the legal issues and data issues around the model. So yeah, we'll cover that a little bit later. But in short, the short answer is, right now, for us, don't put anything into the model that's proprietary or confidential. This is just like the short answer. There are models being built, um, for specific, that's why I said for specific industries or larger companies like, HCA or healthcare, they're building their own models behind their own firewalls. So they can use the models for data, but it stays inside. They're not using a, chat GPT model inside. They're using either a proprietary one, or they may use a platform of a big model, but then their internal IT people have built a wall, like they've it's called like a secure enclave, where they've built the firewalls around. It may use the underlying structure of the main model, but they've built the firewalls around it, so the data is not being shared back out and isn't available publicly. It's everything is behind walls. There are models like lawyers are using. There are specific models for the legal field. Again, that lets the law firm set up like these secure enclaves. Like they can put up these firewalls around the model so they can use it internally, but the information never gets shared. That was a big thing for a lot of industries. Weren't going to use Gen AI models because they were more open in the sense they couldn't protect that data. Or they could just use them for things like, writing some marketing copy, but they could not use it for anything like true kind of data modeling on patients and using any kind of patient data. The other thing that some of those will do is they'll use anonymized data. So even then they'll still put it behind a firewall, but they will sometimes, most patient data, if it goes into any kind of database, is de-identified. So there's very specific parameters around de-identifying data before it goes, even if it goes into, even being used. So it can't identify you can't identify to a specific patient, a person. It's like coded with a number, but there's no access to what that number means in the database. There's a link back hidden behind a firewall, but it de-identifies that patient data. Right. Well, let's get moving on to the next section, because we're going to dig into the models about, again, I'm going to show you kind of some prompt patterns and some things to think about. They'll work for any model going in, but it just starts thinking about a structure. Because if I just tell a model, hey, I need, a blog post about generative AI, the model's like, okay, and it'll just give you something, and it won't know exactly what you want. So, we're going to say there's ways to put input in, kind of some key things to put in, so you can make sure you get like kind of the best information out. So Michelle, go ahead and click to the next slide. All right. This is the transformer part I said, where you used to have to know the code and be able to get anything out of a model. Well, now because of that transformer, we can do everything with natural language, and we put in what's called prompts. So and there's a whole field of a new job description called prompt engineer and prompt engineering. And then there's people that are trained, at big companies, they'll hire prompt engineers to specifically write the best prompt or input into it for a model to get the best out of it. But you and I, as the average people, can also put prompts in that can get you a lot. You don't have to be a prompt engineer and go to school for that. There's things that you can, as long as you kind of remember some very specific things that the model needs. And then as you use the models, as you do this more and more, you'll kind of start refining and realizing, oh, I need to put this in every time, or hey, this is a good thing I forgot to put in, but now in future ones, I'll add this into my prompt. So you'll start getting better and better at your prompts. But it's really, the prompt is just a text input. So whether it's ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini or Copilot, doesn't matter. Perplexity, doesn't matter. Any of them, there's going to be like, you'll have a screen and you have like a little chat window. That's why it's called chat. It's a little window down, like you would chat on your, text on the phone. It's a little chat window, and you just put your input into that window, and it's just a text-based prompt. So, which is fantastic. So think about the prompt as just being, if I have to give instructions to an assistant, the more detailed I can be to giving those instructions, the better results I'm going to get from that assistant. That's all. Think about that in the prompts. If I just say, write me a blog post, I'm going to get who knows what back. But if I'm very specific about what I tell my assistant, I'll get a much better result. And the prompts are conversations. So I put in the first prompt, the model will give me an output. I'll look at it, I'll read it, I'm like, oh, that's not quite right. Then I'll go back to that same thread or chat and I'll say, well, okay, on paragraph 2, can you expand this? Or hey, rewrite paragraph 4, or this isn't quite right. Can you add this in? So you'll start having sounds so crazy, but you're going to have starting a conversation with the model. So you're going to put the first prompt in, it'll give you an output, won't be quite right. You'll say, hey, can you refine this, or give me more of this, or expand this? So you'll put another prompt in, it'll give you another output, you'll put another prompt in. So you're kind of going back and forth with the model. So think about these kind of being building blocks, and kind of like it's input, output, input, output. But it does give you a structured format, but within that format, you can be flexible and adaptable. Like you can say, well, tweak this or add this or get rid of this section here, all that kind of stuff to help refine the output that the model gives you. That's why it's a little bit of an art and a science. I'm going to talk about a structure that helps you get the best information in, but the more information you can kind of keep adding in, the better your output will be. So go ahead and next slide, Michelle. All right, so I'm going to call this the PCAR only because I needed an acronym, because we all need acronyms. So you're going to have persona, context, action, and then refine or reiterate. So the first one is persona. So you need to tell the model what persona it needs to take on. It needs to know what's the role the model is going to, when it gives you its output, how am I responding? Because the model is not going to know that you need it to be acting in a certain role, because that's going to help give it those guardrails and give it the kind of, oh, I'm not responding like I'm a dog trainer. I'm responding like I'm a B2B marketer. So, otherwise it's going to go, I don't know. I'm just going to kind of give you some output because you didn't tell me what I am or who I am when I'm responding. So again, so if the persona would be like, act like a B2B marketer. So I'm not even saying act like, you're a marketer. So, or, act as if you're this, or assume you are X. That's the first thing you need to tell the models what its role is. And so I'm not even saying act like a B2B marketer. I'm saying a B2B marketer, a B2C marketer, an e-commerce marketer, whatever it is. The more specific, more descriptions you can give the model, the better it is. The next is context. So you need to add additional details. So it's expertise, experience. So that persona, that role you want the model to take on, what are some additional details it's going to need to know to fill out that role, to kind of build out that persona that the model needs to take on. So it could be a B2B marketer, but you specialize in lead generation and lead nurturing, email marketing, email newsletter, so you're giving it more context than just saying I'm a B2B marketer, or assume you're a B2B marketer, or act as if you're saying, hey, but your expertise is in lead generation and email marketing and newsletters. So again, you're giving more context around that. And then there's always the action. So action is saying, what specific thing do you want the model to do? Which most people, and I'm writing these as discrete points. When you write the prompt, they might kind of flow together, but you need to think through that you've got these kind of specific points somewhere in that prompt that you're putting in. So action would be, what's the specific thing you want to write? A blog post, or you want to write a Facebook post, or you want to write a newsletter article or something like that. So you get telling it what do you want it to do, and you also want to tell it like maybe some specific kind of tones. So you want to say, you could say, if your tone as the company, as your business is kind of sassy and snarky, then you want it to tell the model to take that tone. So then it can respond back with that kind of a little bit of a sass to it. Or if you want to just kind of say business professional, or if you want to say, I need it to be X number, no longer than this length. And for some reason, whenever I put stuff in the model in the beginning, he used to always put emojis in. Like, I don't need emojis. So then put no emojis, like giving it specific actions, and then like format around, or or word length or something like that, so it knows I only need a 200 word post, or I need a 1200 word article. Like, tell it what you want it to do, and then the kind of formatting and any specifics around that action. And then at the end, you're going to have to refine and reiterate. So, like I said, nothing's going to be perfect the first time. You're going to say, "Oh, okay, that's great. Let's reiterate. Maybe it's not quite right. Expand, modify. Change around the order of these things." Or you might say, "Hey, that's a great one." Or when you get it finalized, you could put the final content back into the model and say, "Okay, now give me 2 Facebook posts and 3 Instagram posts, and what would give me an idea for a I'm going to build a workshop off of this. So give me an idea for a workshop description based on this topic." So you can then go back in and kind of ask the model to reiterate and give you other kind of repurposing from that central piece of content once you finalize it into other platforms or other types of content that you need. Michelle, next slide. So when I say persona, there's like 2 different personas you can have the model to take. And really there's a bajillion. So let's just say when you're prompting there could be 20, 30 different personas. But for small businesses or to get started, kind of 2 are the main ones. One is the expert persona. So you can have the model take on that expert persona, meaning it could be you as the owner of your business. Maybe you're a personal trainer and you're trying to write content for your target customers. So you want the model to act as a personal trainer, and you want it to write that content in that voice. That's the expert persona. So, or maybe you need to write your financial planner. So you want the model to be that. So again, you're asking the model to take on an expert persona and writing its content from that expertise of that. Again, you're still the human in the loop as the expert. So you need to evaluate the model responds back and says, make sure it's accurate and make sure it's how you would say it. Again, there could be 2 different perspectives on something. The model takes one. You might say, "Well, I kind of think differently on that." So then you'd want to add your expertise on top of it, but you want the model to start with kind of that expert persona. So Michelle, the next one. So it's saying, "Hey, these are some examples of what, if I took on an expert persona and I went through this format and context, you would say, hey, act as if you're a personal financial planner. What's the context around that? You're looking to grow your business, establishing yourself as a thought leader. You're targeting professional women in their 30s and you want them to start planning for retirement." So that's all context. You can't just say you're a personal financial planner and then give me some ideas. Like, no, who's my target? You want to be a thought leader. You're targeting professional women, not just the average, anybody. So, and then your action is 10 ideas on a topic to write online LinkedIn posts. And then again, you can refine and reiterate by creating a 12-month content calendar, creating a list of questions that an inexperienced or beginning person might ask a financial planner. So again, you can once you've kind of established those first parts, you can start asking the model different things, still keeping that same persona and context in mind. The other one I have is like a personal trainer. So you're a personal trainer, but you specialize in online fitness programs for women during their pregnancy and post-pregnancy. So again, you're very targeted. You're not just saying, "I'm a personal trainer for everybody," or "I'm a personal trainer to, women in their 50s. It's women that are during pregnancy and post-pregnancy. So then very specific. You want to grow your coaching business by launching an online coaching program. So then give me an outline for an 8-week coaching program. And then it says, well, maybe I want a 4-week one. So you can kind of reiterate or give me some blog post ideas. So then you're still refining based on that persona, and then asking the model different things. But it's keeping that persona in mind in that context when you're asking it for additional actions, and then refining and reiterating. Next one, Michelle. So that's one persona you can have the model take on. The other one is the audience persona. And this is really good because sometimes as an expert, I talk about this being the curse of the expertise or the curse of knowledge. And it's where sometimes as the expert, I've been doing this for 20 years. I forget, but I want to talk to someone at the beginning, like someone just doesn't know anything about this topic yet, but I've been doing it forever. I forget what that beginner does or doesn't know, or where they're starting from sometimes, because I just know it so well. It's so hard for me to oh, wait a minute, you mean you don't know that? It happens a lot. So you can ask the model to take on the persona of the audience or your target customer. So you're asking it to act as if you're someone starting out in this, in learning more about this topic, that, and you can have it take everything from that perspective. Again, it helps you get out of your own head as the expert and realize, well, a beginning person doesn't know that. Well, no, they don't know that. So you can kind of start shifting things. So we always talk about in any business to shift and look at things from the voice of the customer. This helps you shift that perspective to the voice of the customer and find out, okay, what a beginner would be, or a person at the middle stage, or somewhere in a different um, area that I may have not realized, oh, they need a little extra information here where they don't have it today, where I know those things, but they don't necessarily. And so then you're still doing that same assume you are, but you're taking it from assume you're the audience, not the expert. Next one, Michelle. So here's just some examples. Again, you'll have these slides later, but I kind of did the first one I just did as kind of a wildly different audience persona for the same topic. So the first one I said, assume that you have no background in computer science, explain how large language models work. So you can ask the model for that. So again, you're asking them all to assume that there's the average person, no computer science background, but then how would you explain to me how LLMs work? The second one I said, well, you can make that model assume that they're Christopher Columbus, back in the 1400s, and explain, if I was Christopher Columbus, how would you explain models? It's going to explain, put these in there. It's very interesting how the model comes back with how the same topic, but because of the audience changes, it's going to say, oh, I need to say it differently for this audience and differently for this audience, and the same topic, same subject, and differently for if I'm a second grader and I'm bored because I'm just a second grader. How would you explain to me how LLMs work? Very different language and a different way it's going to explain. It's still going to explain it, but it's going to, how it does it will be very different. So that's the audience persona. More realistic example is say, hey, if I'm a 30-year-old woman with no background in exercise science. What's the role of if I was a personal trainer, I would maybe use this one saying, hey, what's the role of recovery and strength training? How would I explain that to the average 30-year-old woman that has no science or exercise science background? But then maybe I'm a college student and I'm actually in an exercise science program. How would I explain the role of recovery to that person? Or then maybe I'm a seventh grader. I'm just learning to play sports and I don't understand how would I'm teaching in a school and I need to teach seventh graders about recovery. How would I explain that to them? If I'm a seventh, so you're asking me to take on that audience persona and say, well, if I was a seventh grader, this is, way you should explain this concept to that different target audience. Michelle? Oh, and then I have another one. So just to kind of more about, if I'm a dog owner, these are just different ones. Or again, always kind of thinking about the voice of the customer. So say I'm a first time dog, because my husband's a dog trainer. So I put this one in here. This is like, assume I'm a first time dog owner. What were the three most common questions that a first time dog owner would have about potty training a puppy? You as the expert might know, well, don't you know that you're supposed to, maybe there's something I forget that the first time person doesn't know when they are trying to again, it's specifically about potty training, not just general training a puppy. Next one is like, I'm a homeowner in the US. Again, you want to make sure that you give it context if there's geographic specific information it needs. And I want to remodel a bathroom. What are the steps I would need to get started? So then those steps can become a blog post that you write about, hey, again, you're providing valuable content to that homeowner. What are the steps to get started about remodeling your bathroom? You can answer that question that they have out there and they're searching for that question. You can have a blog post or content or social media posts around helping that type of customer. Or then last one is like, assume I'm a woman getting married for the first time. What are 5 tips in hiring caterer? That can then be, you can write that, or you can write that into content that you can then use to share with somebody just getting started. Like, oh, I don't know anything about this. So how do I get started? It's always kind of how to get started. And you may, as the expert, think, well, of course, these things. Like, no, they don't. And you forget those things. So Michelle, the next one. All right, so a little bit about context length. So that's why I said earlier that, and these are changing with the different models as new models come out. There's different context, and usually different paid versions versus the free version will have a different context length. But and I'm going to use anthropomorphizing, and every data scientist, computer scientist will be cringing, but it makes sense for us average people. Every model has a max, they call tokens. So it's not it's not complete words. And our problem is that we think of a token is equals one word. It doesn't. A token are word fragments. And again, this is computer scientists, data scientists. This is how things are broken into these tokens, and you'll hear it has so many tokens in this that the model can remember. Again, I'm using terms that they wouldn't like, but basically it's like it can hold in its memory in that chat so many tokens or fragments of words. That's the problem, is that you don't really know how the model breaks up these our prompt in as a fragment. That's kind of why it's kind of a little fuzzy. And they're about this, it's usually in general. So like Chat GPT 3.5 has about 4,096 tokens. That's an actual number they know, but since it's word fragments, it's about 3,000 words. So then you're kind of, it's not exactly number of words. It's not one token to one word. 4.0 is around 8,000 tokens, which is around 6,000 words. 4.0 turbo, you know, again, there's different versions of all these too, and it could be 32,000 tokens to 128, which is about 24,000 to 96,000 words. Okay. Those are just, so understanding that there's just a context link, and that includes your prompt in and your output in output. So as you have this conversation, all of these are using up this token length or this context length. So it's all adding up. It's not just each prompt in is this is 4,000 tokens. No, it's this prompt in, this output, this prompt. If you're continuing that same chat or same thread of conversation, it's all using that same context length or token length. Again, there are various ones, different models. You just have to kind of look at your model, whichever one you're using for that. For the most part, it's probably not going to be an issue, but when you get into longer content, or writing longer or multiple, if you go back and forth a lot in the same chat thread, then that context length can matter. And why does it matter? Because that's, especially in the beginning, people, we hear about hallucinations, and you still hear people talking about hallucinations. The model hallucinates. Well, it's the model could only go so long. That's that context length before it starts losing the thread of the conversation. It can't. So that's when it starts hallucinating. It's still going to give you an output, still going to respond, but you can go, wait a minute, why are you giving me this when I told you up here something else? Like, so it's after a while, it's going to start losing the thread of that conversation. It's kind of like when you're at a party and you talk to somebody after a while, you're just like, I can't even remember what we said up here. So know that if you start getting, the model starts responding kind of like, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense, or it kind of, that hallucination, you kind of start realizing sounds odd. It's probably because it's lost the thread of that conversation. You've exceeded the context length. So what you can do at that point is you can either start a new chat, but you can also just put back in your prompt again, like your original, like, hey, remember that you're supposed to be blah, 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 blah. And you have this like, here's your persona, here's your thing. And you can continue the conversation, but you have to kind of remind it and reset some of those earlier prompts about who it's supposed to be and what it's supposed to be doing back in that conversation thread. So that's why you hear that it's just the way that the models work, and they all do that. They all have a context link. They all can exceed. Now, some of the newer models and the paid versions have much, much, much longer context links than the free versions or older versions. So they're getting better and longer, but at some point you can have it exceed. There is going to be a context link. So that's why, let's say I say large, long form content, you can't put upload a whole book into a model and have it say, summarize this book for me, because that could be a 400-page book and the models just can't adjust that much content. You could put each chapter in and say, summarize each chapter. It probably can do that, but you can't put really long, or some, reports or things that just might be way too long to put into the model. So again, maybe you can maybe break it into sections, but it may not be able to interact the whole thing, a whole big, large document all at once. Next, Michelle. Are you talking, Michelle? I can't hear you.
Well, I don't know why when I blocked my audio. Richard has a comment, FWIW from ChatGPT, context window, token retention. GP4 supports a context window of up to 32,000 tokens, allowing the model to consider a substantial amount of prior conversation.
Mm-hmm.
GPT-4o, the latest model, GPT-4o increases the context window to 128,000 tokens, enabling even longer interactions without losing context. Note, the context window includes both your inputs and the model's outputs. If the conversation exceeds this limit, the model will start to forget earlier parts of the dialogue.
Yeah, that's when I put on there like 4.0 and then I have a slash turbo. So there's a 4.0 and a 4.0 turbo. That's at 32,000, or the turbo is a 128. So again, it just depends on the model that you pick. And even in the paid versions, um, like I said, make sure you can even pick like different models in there, like 4.0 or 4.0 turbo will give you different context. And that's what he was exactly right, where he said, once you exceed that context, the model's like, whoop, I've lost a thread. And so then but the model is always going to give you an output. That's the beauty of the models. It's going to give you, so if it's lost the thread of that conversation, it's going to give you what it can, like it's going to give you something. That's where it hallucinates, starts thinking, and hallucination is more just like, you're just like, this doesn't make sense. Like it just seems to have lost the track of the conversation. And that's exactly right. Where then you realize, okay, I've exceeded my context length. And it's like he said, it's input in as well as output. It's not just output of the model. It's everything that you put in. So the more information you put in, which is better, but that counts toward the total. Go ahead, Michelle. Thank you. So I think we earlier talked about a little bit about legal concerns and data, but so this is kind of where I said copyright infringement. So that's a big thing about the model, especially when they first came out. And I will say most of the copyright has been on the backside. What was the model trained on? Was it trained on copyrighted information? And the courts are battling that. There's cases the genie's out of the bottle. We're not going to stuff AI back in and not be able to use it. So they'll figure that on the back end. That doesn't impact you on as the user as much right now. There's something else I will talk about that, but that's why I say you should never use 100% of, so they'll figure out on the backside legal concerns. On the front side for what you use, if something comes out of the model, that's why I say never use the model oh, here's exactly what it gave me. I'm going to copy and paste that into my blog post. I'm going to use that exact same. I mean, if it's like a Facebook post is one thing. It's so these are so short. What kind of copyright could be? You're writing just usually it's pretty. It's nothing super technical in those kind of things. But if you're writing like a LinkedIn post or a blog post with longer form and more content in there, that's why I say never take from the model. You need to always modify to the model to tailor it to your experience, your customer. Add your own expertise in. That's why it's augmented and it's an assistant to you, but it shouldn't be the final. Because when you add your own expertise, your own customer stories, your own backstory, your own perspectives into the model, then there's a less of an issue of copy because you're putting your own thoughts into what the model gives you. Again, and if you're really concerned, you can always say, you can always put a disclaimer on there like, created with AI assistance or, first draft AI, but, or something, you can put something on there. There's standard language if you want to notify people. And some platforms, I know Amazon's a big one where people are writing these books with AI, and they're usually like little short books, but they'll write them all with AI and just throw up some crap on Amazon. And so Amazon's requiring anyone to disclose if this has been an AI written document. So some platforms are saying you have to disclose if you've used AI. There's a gray area of how much AI assistance to how much human. I mean, that's going to be something that I think each person has to kind of decide on their own. Again, if you just use straight AI out and put it up somewhere, then there's more of a risk than if you add to it and tailor, and that's why I'm saying never use it as the first draft, but always modify it and make it your own. It's a starting point, but it's not the final point. There is also biases, but proprietary information. We kind of touched on that earlier. Again, right now, I would never upload any personal or proprietary or confidential info into a model. Because we're all using even the paid versions, because yes, you can mark on, there's a little checkbox you can say, don't let the model train on this data. Like, okay, really? I don't know. Don't trust it 100%. The model's still learning. It's learning from you as you input in that thread, but you should never, because it's still a third party application. It's just like I wouldn't go share confidential customer information in any kind of thing. Again, when it's done, it's normally de-identified and then used into a database, but it's never just put in there wholesale so you can know who the person is, the customer or the information. So never ever load anything personal, proprietary, or confidential into a third party model. If you had your own homegrown behind a firewall, like some of these big large companies that can build proprietary or can build these firewalls around the models to really ensure that the data isn't going out somewhere, that's one thing, but not for just the general us using a regular model like Gemini or Copilot or ChatGPT or Claude. Those are models that we don't control. Even if they say they're not using it, there's always a risk. The other thing about models is that especially early on, there was biases in the model because it's training on on content written by humans, and all of us, consciously or unconsciously, have biases. We do, good or bad. Biases aren't always negative; they're just biased to be a certain way. Um, but we all have biases, subconsciously or consciously. So when it trains on data that has inherent biases in it, if the model is going to have those same biases. So it to always just kind of think, if when you put your prompt in, if there's a way you can address any bias, if there's a way you can say, hey, put some things in there to make sure that the model knows, hey, don't lean one way or another. Or if you do want it to say, hey, this is my perspective, I want you to write the output with this philosophy, then you're telling the model what your bias is, and you want it to output with that same philosophy that you've told it. So just be very conscious that there's biases in the models, and there's biases you can put into the model with your prompt. The biggest thing I've seen with bias has been a lot more on the image side. So I know in the beginning, and every time these come up, the models, the data scientists and computer scientists do try to write new code to help the model not to address these biases. So they are trying to fix it. It's just, how do you do that over and over? I mean, you can't eliminate everything, but as they come up, they do try to write things in there where, trying to not provide information or not have these biases in there. On the biggest kind of want to see as an example is more on the image side, where people were putting in prompts like, give me an image of a boardroom, for a company, and it was all white men. Like the model would never return any women or any people of color. Like it was all like, well, because it had been trained on data that show, and historically, and because it's trained on backward data. So historically over time, most boardrooms have been white men over 50. I mean, like they're always like, that's kind of been the historic. So it's trained on history, but we know now that forward thinking that we may not want that represented as is the image. So you'd have to make sure that, hey, if you did a prompt in to create something, so that the output coming in would be a more diverse set of people represented, or what's your target customer, you'd want to make sure that anything output on an image represented your target customer and not somebody else that wasn't even your target. So it's been more on the image side, but it's in the text side, generative AI side as well. The other thing is regulatory compliance. Someone mentioned earlier about HIPAA, and there's legal issues. So you always have to be careful of using these models in accordance with the regulations that have been. The problem is that regulations are slow to update based on these models. So they're trying to do that, but if you're in a highly regulated industry, I would look to you like there's always like a trade association or some kind of an association that's helping the people in that industry, you know, work with AI models in an ethical and responsible way. And there's always usually kind of guidelines put out by those industries, or that the regulatory agency may have guidelines that they've put out about how do you use these models in conjunction with the highly regulated industry. And then transparency. If there's ever a concern or a question, you can always put in something in like created with AI assistance, or you know, you know, uh, like AI image AI, like generated with an image AI or generated with Midjourney or something like that. If you did an image one, so and if you have any questions, you should always consult a lawyer. I am not a lawyer, so if there's any concern, especially if you're in a regulated industry or something that with dealing with proprietary information, make sure you check with the lawyer or again add that disclaimer. There are plagiarism checkers. You can just Google those. They can like Grammarly does checking, but some of these tools will have additional, like the paid versions will have a plagiarism checker that can come in on top, or you can go run these through a third party tool, and it'll tell you, it'll give you a percentage that it thinks it might be, if it was truly picking up. But I will say that the models don't just wholesale. It's not how they work. They don't just wholesale take a paragraph from here, pull it in, and give it to you as an output. That's not what they aren't just going in there and like scraping, saying, "Oh, I'm gonna take this paragraph from here and a paragraph from here." They're again because they're learning the structure, and it's like if you read 100,000 books and said, "Give me your opinion on X." Well, you're going to use kind of all those things, and you're going to synthesize it and give you and write it down. But it's not like, oh, I'm taking a paragraph from this book and two sentences from this book and the something from this book. Like it doesn't. It's saying, here's like all the information I've learned. How do I, and then I synthesize that and I write the blog post, I give the output. So it's like thinking of you as a human. If I have a corpus of knowledge I've learned, and I'm I'm analyzing and synthesizing it and then putting it together in a new format here, but I'm not picking, unless if I'm picking something specific from then I would quote it and do the attribute. But or if I need a specific stat, then I'd quote an attribute. But so think of the model that way. In general, it doesn't just pluck things unless it's like a specific fact or a specific data point that it's pulling in. Again, don't use the text as is generated by the tool. You should always, because you always want to add your own voice on it anyway. The models are giving you the most likely, the most predictive thing. So it's giving you the most, I'd say common's not the right word, but it's giving you the most likely thing. So you still need to add your own voice on top of what the model output it gives you. And then fact check it. Never use it. Again, Perplexity might be the only one because you can go find every source that it pulls from into the model because that's the way it was built. So maybe use that for research. But again, I would just figure if it pulls any source or anything that you kind of want, you need to double check because that's you as the human in the loop. Your responsibility is to make sure when you put it out that it's accurate, and that if somebody asks you, well, where'd you get this, information from? Again, some of it's just from your knowledge over the years, but some is like, hey, this specific fact or stat, I better know where I pulled that from. And you should always attribute those things back to the original source where you got it. All right, next, Michelle. Yeah, we're coming up to the end of it. So again, just more of this be aware, caution. So be aware of hallucinations. And I'll say that when the model makes like when it loses that context length, it's going to give you an output. It's never going to say, I don't remember what we talked about. I just can't give you an output. No, it's going to give you an output, and it will always sound very, very confident when it does. Like it's amazing that the model's like, well, here it is, and I'm so confident this is the right thing, and you're like, wait a minute, that's not it at all. So again, you as the human in the loop, we always say you need to add your expertise, your voice, your your knowledge on top of what the model gives you. Again, don't upload any personal proprietary confidential information. Understand the biases in the tools that are trained on content written by humans, and it's trained on historical context. So it's not necessarily where you want to be in the future. So maybe you want to write with, hey, but this is how it should go versus how it has been in the past. So just thinking that you want to make sure that your content reflects contemporary viewpoints and maybe not historical biases. And then it's a great rough draft, first draft generator. It should not be your final, but it can get you, I sound down on it, but it can get you like 80% there. It's these models, even the free versions. That's why I say start with the free ones to get used to it before you do any paid. But it can, you'll be amazed how what the models will give back to you. If you put the right prompt in and you kind of put some of those kind of 4 points that I talked about earlier, and you'll get better and better at writing those prompts, but you'll be amazed at what you can get back from the model just by kind of adding a little bit of context in this to their prompt, um, to getting, and then again, adding your own layer of stories, experiences, anecdotes, your personal expertise on top of the model, because it's not going to know what a conversation you had with a customer a couple of weeks ago, but you can write, it could be a good point in a story or in a post about a specific topic, but you can bring in that personal touch and you can bring in that customer experience. You can bring in your unique business, you know, expertise in on top of the model. And the bottom line is, like, I think if ChatGPT or any of these models can write it, I was think, well, what value or uniqueness are you adding? Are you just adding noise? Or are you adding some valuable content based on your expertise on top of the model? So again, you more and more companies, even before these models came out, you had companies that were just content engines. Literally, they would just churn out blog post after blog post after blog. It didn't matter. They were just writing content because they were trying to do algorithms for the search engines like SEO, and they were just like trying to do all the keywords and get like SEO generated. These same people are now just using AI to do it. So these AI models. So more noise is just, and generic content is going to be out there. So as always, you need to rise above or be specific to your customers, your business, your industry by providing valuable content and not just kind of generating noise. So I think that's, um, I think we're at the end, Michelle. Is that last slide? Yay, questions. So,
Madi made a comment earlier, and I'm going to paraphrase it. She said, they said you can avoid hallucinations by telling the AI prompt, if you don't know the answer, say, I don't know.
yeah, you can, the model will still probably, that's a way to do that, but just kind of know if it happens to, and again, if it happens, then just put the original kind of prompt back in of like, this is who you are, this is the context, and let's kind of and let's continue the conversation. So you don't have to start a new chat. You can just kind of remind it of the role, the persona, the context, and then around that persona, and then kind of continue to, yeah, that's a good point.
Okay, and Gary wants to know if for people using AI, again, I'm paraphrasing, um, the input in the prompts, is that actually educating AI? Are they taking that and absorbing it?
So I most of the models have like a little checkbox somewhere that you can say, do not use my information to train the model. All right. Most people don't check that little box. So, and whether the models there, it's learning from the prompts because it's learning in that thread of that conversation, it's taking it in. Is it going back and training the big model? No one knows. That's a little black box. My assumption would always be that the model is learning whether and it's taking it back in. And even if you say, you check the box saying, no, don't train on my prompts, Okay. There's always a risk. I just say that um, it just assume that it is, um, especially if you don't check the little box. But even if you check the box, I would just kind of go, it's learning from you as a thread of the conversation, if nothing else, even if it's not taking it back to the big model. And the nice thing about the prompts is that all the models will save your prompts on the on like a left hand menu, or they'll save it so you can go back. Like maybe you did something and then a month ago you want to go, let me go back and revisit it. So you can go back to that chat that you had that was saved and kind of re-prompt the model and start again. So you don't have to start from scratch. Like if it's about the same topic, like, oh, we about a month ago I did a blog post. Let me go back to that same chat a month ago and tweak. So I don't have to kind of tweak that. So you have to start from scratch. So that's kind of a nice thing where those models are saving those chats. Um, so you don't have to go back and restart from scratch every time.
Okay, that's all I have.
All right. Well, there's any other questions that anybody wants to come off and ask, but these have been great questions. So thank you for that. I don't know if has anyone used any of the models? Do they find one they like? And most people kind of use Chat GPT because it's a free version. And it's a pretty powerful, and it kind of was the early mover in the market. And then with the other ones coming on board, people are starting to kind of use other models. But I think I saw something else pop up, but I didn't see it. It went away. Actually, you can stop screen sharing if you want to go. But was there something else, Michelle?
Harry wants to know if there's really any difference in the paid versus free version of Chat GPT if you
From
prompt correctly.
Yeah, from the prompt perspective, no. It's more the paid version has a longer context length. The paid versions will have so the paid versions now have these third party not APIs. I'm trying to think of there's like third party applications that people have written that you can add on to that you can add into your Chat GPT paid version model. So like the one at the internet, in the free version, the model's not going out to the internet and checking anything, but there's a paid version and you can add a third party plugin. That's the word I'm looking for. You can add a third party like plugin that when you do things, the model will go out and check the actual internet, like will connect out. But traditionally the model's a standalone unless you add that plugin. So the paid versions, you can longer context. You have these it's kind of like an app store, it's like these plugins. These companies are writing these plugins that you can plug into your model to have it do different functions. And then what was the third? There was a third thing. And then you can kind of create agents. That's a little more advanced where you can kind of create agents and templates in these models to kind of, if you do something over and over and over, these agents, you can write this agent to kind of do this function if you do something very repetitive over and over. So it's more the model itself will work except for context length. The prompting will be the same. The outputs, there's not going to be something different that the paid versions give you except for context, these plugins, and then like how the agents work. And you can do more advanced functionality with the paid version. That's why I think start with like the free version. And then if you need kind of that additional, really, I think the next thing would be probably these plugins. If you need some of that functionality, then it's good or you need longer context length, then step up to the paid.
Okay. Lottie says Gemini has an interesting feature
Mm.
called Expert, where you can
Mm.
provide information once instead of rewriting it over and over in any chat. Other models may have similar feature in their paid version.
Yeah, that's where the paid versions you can create like templates and you can create. It depends on the model, but yeah, they have different um, things where you don't. If you do something over and over, you can save that in the paid version of the model instead of having to recreate it. So yeah, that's another functionality.
Gary is asking, you mentioned use of AI for SEO. Do
Mhm.
you think this is a good use of AI? Is AI generated content a good way to get to the first page of Google search results?
Everyone wants to answer that question. That's why there's whole companies around SEO. So for the longest time, for the recent time, Google and Bing and all those search engines have gotten very, very good at over time. Years ago, and I'm not an SEO expert, but years ago, SEO is about keyword stuffing. It was how many keywords can you put in a blog post on a page. So the more keywords you had, then the algorithms from the search engines would go, oh, well, this post has 10 keywords that of this around this topic, and this one has 5. So obviously this 10 keyword post was more credible, and it should be right. It should rise up to the, earlier in the search results. Google figured out people were just stuffing keywords, so that it stopped doing that. Google and all the other search engines are looking for interactions with the post. They're looking for relevance, and they want it written. They've, again, their algorithms, their models, their artificial intelligence that drives their search models, um, has been reflecting more and more about it needs to be written as a human would write it, or in natural language and conversational language, and not try to written artificially for SEO. It sounds very, I'm not explaining that very well, but it's, it once it written, it's saying the best content sounds and is written like a person wrote it, being very natural and not kind of stuffed with keywords. So that's a long way to get to where we are now, where the content now, where the AI generated, again, still needs, it can't just be full of keywords, because SEO now is more about how do people, and then it was all about backlinks, and people were then trying to game SEO with how many links they would have to an article, and that was supposed to show that was more credible because it had more people, other sites linking to it. I mean, Google figures all this stuff out. I mean, we can try to game it, but it's Google. The search engines are way smarter than we are, and that's all they do all day long, is try to figure out how people are gaming the system and putting a stop to it. So they really want articles that are informative, that sound like, that make sense, and they're written for human beings to consume. It's, I don't, how the models do that, don't know. Um, but yes, you can still use Gen AI to write content, but if you're putting out the same kind of, if you're using the model just to say, make it a content engine where it's like, give me a blog post about the 6 things for a personal trainer, or 6 things for, this, and it sounds like everybody else's, you're not going to rise to anything in Google, because it's going to go, your content is kind of generic, and it's kind of basic, and it's kind of common. There's 20,000 articles, 20,000 other blog posts out there with the same kind of generic content. But when you can add that, take that base content and then add on specifics for your customers and that to your industry, and show your expertise, that's going to be more helpful. There's no guaranteed ever, because you got paid advertising. So there's big companies that are always going to pay to be ranked in the top of the search engines. That's just a fact of life. As a small business, you're not going to be able to spend the tens of thousands of dollars a month to, you know, pay the search engines to get higher in rankings. But again, your content should be focused on your target customer. And then you should also be looking at how you connect with them. Where are they finding their information? And that's part of that market research. Oh, if you don't, we have a market research workshop that Cal teaches, that you should take to help find where your target audience or customers are, and then making sure, how do you get your content in front of them in the place where they're looking for it. And that would be a better use of targeting, like websites they go to, or targeting magazines they read, or Facebook groups that they're in, or that kind of thing, versus trying to compete with the large companies to try to get on the first page of Google. That's going to be very expensive to get on the first page. Or you'd have to have such a, like, things like the Mayo Clinic, I mean, they're going to come up early in Google because they have such a history and such a deep bench of content over, the decades that they've been in business and their expertise in their very specific space about, medical information, but or healthcare. But sorry, that was a long-winded answer. So everyone wishes they had the magic SEO button.
That's all I have here.
All right.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Well, excellent. Well, thank you for your time. Hopefully this was helpful. Again, just I would, if nothing else, just go start playing with these in and anything that you think about writing today, just start putting it to the model and see what it comes up with. It's amazing. Like it can get you so far down the road and get you so started and just save time because like I talked to somebody the other day and they were writing they had to do like a couple page description. They were submitting a topic in for like a speaker at a panel. And so they said it would have taken me 45 minutes to kind of write up this summary of the talk they wanted to give. They went in some prompts back and forth with the model, like 10 minutes later had it and sent it in. Like just that saving of time of not sitting there and trying to write it for 45 minutes. I mean, they literally said that. So things like that where you just start putting it in there and you'll get better at putting the prompts in and adding more information and giving it more context as you go back and forth with the models. But it can just get you that much further down the road to kind of get started and then kind of give you some ideas because sometimes when you're by yourself you're like I can't think what are some ideas about this, like just put it in there and ask the model to generate ideas. Some will be good, some will be like that's not so good, but that's you as a human in the loop saying now these aren't that good, but this one actually has possibility and maybe I'll expand on this one and this is one I hadn't thought of. So it's pretty impressive. All right.
Great.
Well, if you, I said we go play around with it. We do this like once a quarter, but you can always come back and take it again if something the first time there's a lot of information I gave you, but take a little bit of it, get started, and then kind of keep continuing on. But it's a great tool that you can use in your business, just like any other tool that you use. And thanks for taking your Saturday morning to spend with us. And thank you, Michelle.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sandy. Outstanding information as always, and there's so much of it. So,
Mhm.
um, everyone on the webinar, you will be receiving the slide deck. It may take a couple days for me to get it out to you, but you will be receiving it. So you can review those and absorb more of it, more of the
Yeah,
information.
and
So,
I did write the slides. They're very text heavy, only because I knew they'd be sent out afterwards. So because I hate slides that it's a presentation and there's like one word on the slide like grow. Well, what? And then the person talked 10 minutes. You're like, I don't even know what that means. So they are text heavy for you to go back and reference them later.
excellent, excellent. I
Thank you.
encourage each of you on the webinar to go visit our chapter website, which is score.org/Nashville. It's on the lower left of the slide, and see all the resources there. Number one, you can click on take a webinar or got the word. But anyway, you can look at all the classes that we have listed.
Workshops.
Thank you. Take a workshop. Blah.
Hear you.
Um, Everything that I've posted is there, and we have workshops posted through June. And you can go back frequently. Plus, you'll be getting emails about up and coming workshops. I'd like to point out on May 20th, we have an in-person event. It's called Score Connect Live. And this is where you can come meet other people, network, find out what other people are doing. There will be mentors there of whom you can ask questions. So it's a great evening. There'll be food and adult beverages there. So that might entice you to show up. It's a free event, so you are more than welcome to attend, please. Um, we have great workshops this month and hope you look and attend. So thank you all for being here. And again, Sandy, thank you for your time and your expertise on this. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
So everyone have a great rest of your weekend, and we hope to see you soon. Take care.
Bye.